See, she's not even paying any attention, but that's okay. We're going to go ahead. What? Hi, welcome to the Iowa Files. I'm Gail Brubaker. I'm the Executive Director of the West Des Moines Historical Society, and we want to thank our members and donors and the Friends Foundation for the Library for their support, as well as the Hatfield family for making our live streaming possible and our recording. So in case you didn't know, the last 3 years, I think it's 3 years of the Iowa Files, are all on our YouTube channel. So you can go back and watch these presentations in your jammy jams, which is really cool. The other thing that's really cool to do in your jammies is take a virtual tour of the Jordan House. We just launched it. If you go to our website under Plan Your Visit, there's a 3D virtual tour. You don't have to download an app. You just have to be able to walk virtually by using your fingers to take you through the different rooms of the house. And there are several hundred hotspot tags on items in the house that you can learn more about them. So we are really, really proud of that. So please go check it out. Another thing to check out, David wrote another book. And this one is awesome. I'm through 2 chapters already. So he is combining true stories with great historical fiction. So if you want to know more about it after the Iowa Files, don't bug him while he's recording because, you know, we pay him to do this. So, but definitely bug him after because this is really fascinating about indigenous people being able to speak Hebrew, which is a fact. I know, isn't that cool? So don't bother me, I'm going to be reading while Kent's talking. So if you were here last time, Kent's a very quiet, mild-mannered historian. No, this dude is rowdy and awesome. So he's going to be talking about something that is really important and has come up for the Historical Society recently about the treatment of, for us, it is not ancient human remains, but it is about sacred items that, such as eagle feathers, that we have been offered as a gift, but we have to figure out a way to legally do that. So this really hits home to us right now. So Kent Halstead.
Thanks, Gail. Thanks, Gail. You are a good speaker. So just wanted to let you know what a typical teacher does this weekend. I've been studying how tuberculosis influenced the westward migration and how people moved to New Mexico and California. New Mexico tried to become a state for so long, but they had so many indigenous people, the government wouldn't allow them to be a state. So they recruited sanitariums. They started having people move to New Mexico so they could sit out in the sun and watch it, and they eventually became a state like that. So tuberculosis had a huge influence. Okay, think about the Waltons. Who moved to Arizona? The mom did, didn't she? Really, she didn't want to be on the series anymore, but they invented it wasn't real. They invented she had tuberculosis and she moved to Arizona. But just the history of disease fascinates me. We studied the potato famine this year in 8th grade, and I teach 8th grade at Indianola, and you can interrupt me anytime. Nobody's perfect, Hannah Montana. Okay? But the potato famine, the average family in Ireland I'll get to drinking, but they ate 40 pounds of potatoes per day, the average family in Ireland. And why didn't England help them out more? Because they already thought the Irish were lazy, and so they didn't want to help out the Irish anymore. England did not, so that's what happened. Did Irish women drink more in Ireland or in the United States? What do you predict? Certainly in the United States, because they could only drink if they were shopping. So every grocery store added a tenement in the back and a bar in the back. So that's how Irish women got to drink a lot when they were shopping. It's just a couple things I love to do. So I'm pretty spoiled. Who says teaching is stressful? I'm 39 and I feel great. Okay? It's a privilege to be a teacher. It's a privilege to be here today. And you can interrupt me anytime. This is not, okay? I forgot about my seating chart. And if you screw around, we will have Breakfast Club with Malloy Ringwald and Emilio Estevez. And we'll have Saturday school. Okay? Okay, well, there goes another teacher who makes 10 million bucks a year. Meanwhile, I'm working my butt off playing professional hoops and I can barely pay rent. I mean, wow. I just want to announce I just signed a new 4-year contract to teach 4 more years for $324 million with incentives. So that's what's going on right now. I'm pretty fired. I do want to be a role model. Okay? So I just signed that new contract. It's, yeah, $324 million with incentives and stuff. I haven't told my wife yet because she thinks I'm retiring. But anyway, so primary sources fascinate me, and they tell the story. In the climate we teach in now, primary sources, so that's what you're going to see me use today. It's not really me influencing people. It's about what does the primary sources say. So that's kind of the way I teach, and I really like that as well.
Well, I think not many people know that treaties were signed. That might be it.
Treaty is fundamentally an agreement between two nations.
So here are the 9 treaties that were used to move Native Americans from Iowa to Kansas and eventually to Oklahoma. 9 treaties. You can see when they started and went through. We can't focus on all 9. I have to be home by midnight. So we are going to focus on one of them, and this is the one we're going to focus on because it affects central Iowa a lot. The treaty with the Sauk and Fox, so October 11th, 1842. So this line really divides Iowa, the Red Rock line, and you can see where it is, and it went from Pella to Knoxville, and I'll show you that here in a little bit, but that's just kind of the line we're going to focus on today for that. Here is part of the treaty by John Chambers, by the Red Arrow, and the Commissioner, Confederated Tribe of the Sauk and Fox, Indians represented by their chiefs, headmen, and braves. So that is part of the treaty, and I don't like a lot of words on the screen, so that's why the blue's there, okay? Because we just don't need that. Our brains don't need that. So I really work hard as a teacher to not have a lot. For Indians represented by their chiefs, headmen, and braves. And I love vocabulary. That's rich right there, okay? So I do like that. The Sacs and Foxes agree they will remove to the west side of the line, running north and south from the painted or red rocks on the White Breast Creek, which is right by Knoxville. It starts in Warren County, on or before the 1st of May. And that so soon after the president should have signed them a residence upon the waters of Missouri, as their chiefs shall consent to do so. The tribe will remove to the land so assigned them, that if they do not remove before the expiration of their term of 3 years, they will have to pay the removal at their own expense. Okay? So that are the words from the treaty. John Chambers, you saw his name. I have another red arrow here. Native Americans, as you know, didn't read or write. They had oral history. They passed down oral songs. But the United States government had to have some way to prove that they wanted to sell their land, wanted to cede their land, C-E-D-E. What did they use? What did they get these Native Americans to do? X is exactly right. So X is to add something or what has been stated in a pen. So there is the treaty right there. And for the Sox, Keokuk signed, and there's Powashik's signature for the Foxes. So they sign with an X. Okay? Sometimes when I go to Casey's and I charge stuff, I'm a little mad about this. They had to sign with an X, so I sign with an X. And the person at Casey's says, why do you sign with an X? And 4 hours later, I'm talking about this, and I'm banned from Casey's now. But anyway, that's what happened. It's worth it. So here's where they were moved to, okay? Mainly to Kansas, but eventually to Oklahoma. Native American tribes were smart enough to sometimes pick out the worst land. The Osage had one time lived in Wisconsin. They were moved to Kansas. When they moved to Kansas to Oklahoma, and they're right here, by the way, they picked out the worst land in Oklahoma on purpose so they wouldn't have to move again. Then what did they find on their land? They found oil and gas. Then the government appointed caretakers for them. Then Some of them started dying, and some of them started marrying their caretakers. What's the name of that movie and book that's out about that? Called Killers of the Flower Moon. That's from that story. That's where that comes from. So the Iowa and the Sauk and Fox, that's where they lived. This is so interesting to me. A permanent, okay? I went to Great Clips yesterday, and I had a coupon, by the way, $3 off, and I got a permanent. So that means I could never change my hair, okay? Really, this is just a temporary. But anyway, eventually, think about that. Oklahoma does not become a state till 1907. You know, it's pretty amazing. Iowa became a state December 28th, 1846, as most of you know. Okay, now let's get back to these 9 treaties. I love maps. I think we need maps in our brain. So there's the Red Rock line. I'm a bad axe. Oh, I am a bad axe. I just want you to know that. Okay, 8th graders, I'm a former gang member. Okay, I have tattoos from Cracker Jacks. I used to be in the Apple Dumpling Gang with Don Knotts. Okay, and we helped old ladies and old men across the street. We shoveled their driveways, and some of those people, I'm older than them now. Wow. Okay, I'm a bad axe. Oh, there it is. I'm a Bad Axe River fan. That's what I was saying. I'm a Bad Axe River fan. I like the Bad Axe River. Okay? Here's how important it is in Iowa history. Okay? Did you think I swore a little bit or no? I did not. In the final battle of the Black Hawk War, the troops killed most of the native people, men, women, and children, at the Bad Axe River. Black Hawk survived and was sent to prison. Native Americans weren't supposed to go east of the Mississippi after 1830. Most of you know that. Andrew Jackson, the Trail of Tears, which involved lots of tribes. It wasn't just the Cherokee and the Choctaw and the Seminole. It was the Nez Perce. It was the Walla Walla. It was the Clatsop. It was lots of tribes were supposed to move to Oklahoma. Black Hawk was trying to surrender, actually, because they knew they were outgunned, but a massacre happened. And there's a little bit about Black Hawk. Dies in 1838. He was a warrior. He's my favorite person to study. He fought back. He was not a government chief at all. Black Hawk was not. My reason teaches me the land cannot be sold, and that's from his autobiography. And most of you know, Native Americans didn't, they thought they just lived, month of ripening strawberries, month of frost in the teepee. Their whole life was spent outside, besides in their teepee a little bit. And so they didn't build Interstate 90, which goes from Boston to Seattle, Interstate 80, New York to San Francisco. They lived on the land, and most of you know that for that purpose. Here is Chief Black Hawk's tombstone, okay? Okay, in the treaty, really like this, the Sauk and Foxes have caused the remains of their late distinguished Chief Wapello to be buried at their agency. So how can we show history matters today? What's IRL stand for? You young people in here. What's IRL stand for? In real life. I love showing this. This is the treaty still matters today. That's his grave today. In real life, there's the words from the treaty. It's still there. This really happened. This isn't a video game. This isn't the Oregon Trail video game where you died of dysentery. This is IRL in real life. And anytime I can do that in the classroom, I really like that as well. And that's where it is, and that's where he's buried at.
Is that Wapello County?
Yeah. Okay. What'd you say?
I said in Wapello.
Yeah, in Wapello County, yeah. So, a Sauk named Keokuk as the head Okama and negotiator. By the way, the treaty from 1842, each principal chief got $500 a year for signing that treaty with an X. So, the Red Rock line. Here is the Red Rock line. How many people have seen this sign before? Okay. Well, it ran due south of Knoxville to Missouri, white man on the west, white man on the east and Native Americans on the west. So white man over here and Native Americans over here after 1842. I just think it's really interesting. Just to zoom in on it a little bit. That was part of the treaty, which we read to you. Okay. This is in Warren County. I'll show you where this is. There's Lacona right there. There's Indianola. And that's where I teach at. I teach 8th grade history in Indianola. And I'm pretty spoiled I get to do that. You know, think about when you go to the Jordan house, you go home and talk about it to your spouse or whoever you live with, and sometimes they don't want to hear it. I get to go to the Jordan house and talk to 8th graders about it. That's pretty cool. I have to package it. It doesn't mean they want to hear it, but I have to package it so they learn about that potato famine. So that's the art of teaching. The art of teaching is not just talking about it, it's the art of, we're all curious about things and we have to tap into that curiousness. Anyway, the land in Lacona was sold for $1.25 an acre in Warren County in 1845. Why? Because Native Americans had to be out west of that line in 1845. So that's how important that treaty was for that purpose. And there's the Red Rock line again. So that's just one part of that treaty from 1842. And there was the temporary Indian boundary right there. So some more of the rich vocabulary. The Confederated Tribes of the Sauk and Foxes cede to the United States forever. I like that word, forever. So 1843 had to be out, and there is where Lacona is in Warren County. So Sauk and Foxes had to be out by 1845, hence $1.25 an acre for the land. Okay, so this was all done. It wasn't an accident. You know, it was done on purpose for that. Okay, so a little bit more about Keokuk. After the Black Hawk War, Keokuk was made head chief of all the Sauk and Fox tribes. Okay? So he was a Sauk leader. Black Hawk was the Fox leader, but the rest of the story is he was a friend of the Americans. So this was a problem. Much land was signed away where chiefs didn't have the right okama. They didn't have the right lineage to sign it away, but that we just needed an X. So that's what happened. So Keokuk is known more as a government chief than a warrior like Black Hawk. And they did know about each other, and supposedly they didn't get along. I don't know if that's true or not. So as you know, Black Hawk was sent to prison, and he eventually goes to Washington, D.C. Like a lot of Native Americans were brought to Washington, D.C. to show how powerful the United States was. That wasn't unusual at all. Keokuk got his own yard, and that's where his yard, because he gave away a lot of this land. So he really never had to move to Kansas like the rest of the Sauk and Fox. Okay, this tribe's pretty amazing. And most of you know all about it, but so Meskwaki, Native American tribes changed names a lot because they had to stay alive. Okay? So they had to integrate with each other. Otherwise, they would have been not existing anymore. So they combined, they go by the native name of Meskwaki, and this is a settlement, as most of you know, because they own it. So some Meskwaki never left after the 1842 treaty. They lived in the Iowa River Valley, and with the annuity that they got for moving to Kansas, they started buying their land back. And the Iowa state government in 1858 said, you can stay here. So I give Iowa credit for that. You do not have to move. You can stay here. And so that's why it's not a res, it's a settlement. And it's amazing. And yes, I've been there. I think many of you have. Okay? Mixed blood people were the descendants of relationships between American Indian and white Europeans. They were known as half-breeds. So I call this Iowa nice, I guess. It's not really, but this is where they had to live. So if you had a Native American mom and a French European dad, you did not have to move because you were partly not Native American. So this is where they got to live, and that's on that big poster right there, the Half-Breed Tract in Lee County. So the land wasn't worth very much. Most of them sold it for pennies on a dollar and moved on. But so that's where that's from. So just to show you a couple things. Here's where the Half-Breed Tract is. There's the Bad Axe River, and there is, okay. So look at those words. What's the key word in the middle? Starts with an N. Neutral. Isn't that interesting? I think that's so interesting. I used to look at this and think, what the heck is that? So here's lead mines in Wisconsin. It wasn't the government kicking Native Americans out all the time, was it? Who was it? It was the people. It was the people. It wasn't the government. The government was trying to protect the people. And that's what Andrew Jackson says in his 1830 policy. So it wasn't always the government. It was the people wanted this land. So they wanted these lead mines in Wisconsin. The Winnebago tribe, also known as the Ho-Chunk tribe. So they were put there. Okay? Who were they between? They were between the Sauk and Fox and the Sioux. And that's why it's called neutral ground, because they had never fought with either of them. This reminds me of parents sitting between their kids in the minivan on the way to Oregon. So that's what it reminds me of for that purpose. So that's why you see stuff like that in maps. And it's fun to go in there and find out what it's about, what happened on it. Okay, forts. Forts were built in Iowa primarily to control Native Americans and protect settlers along waterways. Fort Dodge, Fort Armstrong, Fort Madison. Okay? There's all the forts that were in Iowa to protect these new settlers from Native Americans and protect their interest. Okay? Now, most of them aren't here anymore, but these still are. Okay? After being defeated by the Sauk and Meskwaki, were forced to relinquish 2 million or 6 million acres and give up their rights to plant, hunt, or fish on the land. The purchase was made and was named for Chief Blackhawk, who held prisoner at the time the purchase was completed. And here's the map of the Blackhawk purchase right there. The Blackhawk purchase shown on the right in yellow. So that's how it kind of went down, per se, in 1832. Okay, and here's the purchase treaty, Chiefs Keokuk and Wapello, 1832. And what'd they sign with? An X. Okay? Okay. Yes?
Actually, a good question.
Yeah.
I don't know how to necessarily word this.
Yeah.
Were the people of Iowa and these areas trying to move the Native Americans out? This is going to be a hard question. Is it because they were racist and trying to move them out, or because it was more commercial and they wanted to own the land?
It was obviously a little bit of both. But once the word got out that Iowa was very good land, it was taken very quickly. Think about the Oregon Trail. Iowa was called the Great American Desert by Stephen Long in 1819. He came through here and he labeled Iowa and west of here the Great American Desert. Otherwise, the Oregon Trail would have stopped in Iowa. But they didn't think it was very good land, so they went all the way to the Willamette Valley and got 320 acres. But once the word got out that you could farm in Iowa and you could cultivate, the first crop was wheat, it didn't go very well, then it became corn, then people wanted the land and land fever took over a lot. Okay? Racist was everybody about Native Americans. So that was very common, but really it was about the land. When did South Dakota become a state? Iowa in 1846. When did South Dakota become a state? 1889, because it wasn't very good land. We were letting Native Americans, then gold was discovered in Mayasapa, the Black Hills. Think about Oklahoma. We were going to let Native Americans live there forever because it wasn't very good land. So I'd really say it was more about the land than the racism for that. Does that answer your question? Okay. Okay. So when you go home today and your grandkids ask you what you did at school today, say you listened to Criminal. Okay?
Repatriation. Repatriation.
I never know how to pronounce them. So this is the advantage teachers have today. Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act. We can do things like this in class. We can do this. I can walk around the room and act tough and do this with 8th graders. Okay? I mean, we're spoiled.
Repatriation.
The bay made of dirt and covered in grass. There are mounds like these all over the Midwest, and many are effigies of animals.
So, I mean, this is literally close to a 100-foot long animal that's been sculpted onto the earth by bringing basket after basket after
How many
basket
people
of
been in it?
earth and piling it all up. I mean, there's the equivalent of
Putting it on display. The Native rights movement argued that the scientific community needed to treat Native American remains with respect. In 1971, a highway construction crew uncovered an old cemetery in Iowa. The remains of 28 people were dug up, including one Native American woman and a child. The 26 white people were put in new caskets and reburied at the local cemetery. But the Native American woman and child were boxed up and sent to the state archaeologist. Removed. And that's when Jim Halstead was brought in and asked to fix it.
You know, Effigy Mounds was in turmoil. I knew it was in turmoil. It's clear as day that the park was in the wrong. So
2,000 bones, sacred bones, went missing 21 years ago at Effigy Mounds National Park in northeastern Iowa. Jim Halstead requested an inventory of the park's remains.
Representative asked for a full inventory of the remains in the park's collection. He went to a park employee named Sharon Greener. She handled the inventories, and asked her to show him the reports from the 90s and early 2000s. It took her a few days to find them. When she did, she didn't give that to Pat Murphy. Instead, she went straight to the new superintendent, Jim Halstead.
and she put this report down on my desk, just plopped it on my desk, and she said, "You need to read this for the place."
David interviewed all the park's employees, including Sharon Greener, who put the report on Jim Halstead's desk in the first place. He actually interviewed her twice. The first time, she said she thought the park's remains had been transferred to the state archaeologist in Iowa City. But David Barlin-Lyles had already checked that. It wasn't true. So we went back for a second interview, and the story changed.
And she finally told me that, indeed, she removed the human remains from the museum catalog drawers of the park unit, put them into 2 moving boxes. She created the report of survey all under the orders of Thomas Munson, and she picked up a box. Thomas Munson picked up a box. They walked him up the stairs out of the basement of the visitor center, walked through the visitor center of Effigy Mounds, out the front door, out into the parking lot, and put them in the trunk of Thomas Munson's Ford Taurus.
This is where the Native American Graves and Repatriation Act comes into play from 1990 to protect those remains so they're not in a museum, so families can have their ancestors back. That's where this is going.
Information I had in my case file and the documents I felt were pertinent to the investigation, and I started by asking Tom Munson to talk to me about what he thinks happened here.
David says that Tom offered 3 different explanations. That he had sent the remains to the state archaeologist, that he sent them to an archaeological center in Nebraska, and that he had gotten an unusual directive from the national office in D.C. For each explanation, David produced documents to prove Tom wrong.
Eventually, Linda turned to Tom and said, "I don't think you're telling this young man the truth." To her left, and looked at an area in front of a white minivan that they had parked in there. And she goes, "I wonder if that's it." And she walked to this cardboard box that was frankly out of place in their garage. Everything else about the garage was pretty tidy and neat and newer. And there was this older cardboard box, and she pulled it slightly out from the wall, opened up the flaps of the cardboard box, and under the flaps was a partially opened kind of black garbage bag. And I peeked over her shoulder and I could see the head of a femur. And I knew that that was what I was looking for.
The judge ordered that Munson apologize publicly and serve 10 consecutive weekends in jail, 12 months of probation, and 1 year of home confinement. In his written apology, Munson stated he knowingly removed these items from the monument and hid them from over 20 years in his garage in a mistaken effort to avoid the obligations by the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act. So this policy, we look at it quite a bit, and we talk about different things like that. So that is from criminal, okay? So you're bad acts people too, because you listen to criminal, and I'm proud of you, okay? Okay. We learn best from stories, obviously. Here's another story. What is this up on the screen? Not the words, it's a spoon, isn't it? You can see what it says. Very interesting. Wow, I had cereal this morning, but my spoon didn't. Okay, so this starts in Spirit Lake in 1857. Some of you know about the Spirit Lake. It's called a massacre, the Abbey Garter Cabin. In 1857, among rising tensions between Native Americans and new settlers, and I really like that word, new settlers. The land was already settled. The Sioux, the Lakota, the Dakota, the Iowa, the Sauk and Fox, the Ponca, they already lived here. You know, we think it's a big deal to go camping. They camped all the time, okay? When Lewis and Clark went west in 1804, the Nez Perce, the Walla Walla, the Flatheads, the Chinook, they didn't see them as a threat. They just thought they were passing through, which I think is pretty interesting. And they also gave them presents. But they weren't the first people to see that land because these people already lived there. And I just think that's a key thing to make. So I like the word new settlers. Abby Garden's family was killed by men of the Dakota Indian Nation. The tragedy became known as the Spirit Lake conflict. Young Abby was taken hostage and released 84 days later. Okay? What do most of us do the day after Christmas? We take back presents that our aunt gave us to get money. I did that for years. Oh yeah, I was famous at Yonkers. Okay? This is the day after Christmas. Look at the sign. This sign was up till 1953 in Mankato, Minnesota. Okay?
The day after Christmas, those men were marched onto a big platform in Mankato's town square. Hoods were pulled over their heads. 4,000 people had come from miles around to watch.
And that's the 38. The people in Minnesota wanted 305 executed. Abraham Lincoln was the president. He looked at the evidence and he came up with the number of 39 to be executed December 22nd, or December 26, 1862. One was pardoned at the last moment, so 38 of them were killed with the same rope. The person that cut the rope is named Andrew Myrick. He was the Indian agent. Minnesota had Upper Sioux Agency and Lower Sioux Agency, and that's an agency is where you're supposed to give out food because they weren't allowed to fish or hunt anymore. That's why I showed you the treaty. So they were supposed to give them food, even though they had food at Lower Indian Agency. He said, let them eat their own dung. I'm not giving them any food. So that's what happened in Spirit Lake, and that's what happened here.
Men held each other's hands and sang prayers till the moment the floor under them dropped away.
And here is just a list of some of the Native Americans that were hanged by rope that day, the day after Christmas, 1862. Okay?
Today, the U.S. government hanged Cut-Nose and 37 other lawyers, the largest mass execution in American history. Great Spirit. Wind comes back, the parent hawk, to make a rattling noise.
This is Cut-Nose. I'm just going to use that name. And
Cut-Nose stands on a cloud. Cut-Nose. The president, Abraham Lincoln. They got trials, but no lawyers, no due process, or translators. They couldn't understand the charges against them when accused of crimes they didn't commit. All 38 were found guilty. They were buried in one grave. W. Mayo headed to the scene in search of a body he could use. Mayo, whose sons would go on to form the Mayo Clinic, returned home with the corpse of Cut-Nose. The young doctor carted the corpse to his office, dissected it, melted off the flesh, and made a skeleton he studied and allowed his children to play with. The young doctor's name was William Mayo. He moved Cut-Nose's skull to the famous hospital he founded. The stolen skull remained there on display for more than a century. Cut-Nose's bones were kept in an iron kettle, with William Mayo pulling out pieces for his sons William and Charles to play with. Years later, an inventory mandated by NAGPRA found the never displayed exhibit was a piece of Cut-Nose's skin.
There's the policy. These people are awesome. Gary and Leanne.
Cut-Nose's relatives, Gary Redall and Leanne Redall, 2018. After more than 150, the Mayo Clinic wants to apologize.
Which is awesome. They need to.
The Mayo Clinic wanted to apologize. Earlier this year, they contacted Leanne. We want to adopt a new scholarship for a Native American student. We want to name the scholarship in honor of Cut-Nose. Would you fly to Rochester, Minnesota for the announcement, Leanne?
Leanne Redall, will you fly to Rochester from the Santee Sioux Reservation in Nebraska? And that's where the Mayo Clinic is. Most of you know that.
Mayo creates scholarship as apology for misuse of Dakota leaders' body.
The important man's name is Jeffrey Bolton. He's a bigwig at the most famous hospital. Guess what? He flew on an airplane from Rochester to the Santee Sioux Reservation. Leanne said, I'm not coming to Mankato, or I'm not coming to Rochester. If you want to do this, you're coming to the reservation. Makes me cry.
Name is Jeffrey Bolton. Leanne Redall. She and many Redalls are the descendants of the great lawyer Cut-Nose. Mayo Clinic treated their ancestors' body like a hunter might treat a deer head he mounts on the wall. History can bind us in broken ways. We acknowledge our role in that broken history, Jeffrey Bolton.
Awesome. And this does not define them either. This is just part of their past, and that's important for all of us to remember.
Leanne, we want to fly you to Minnesota. Would that be yes? But you can't do it in Minnesota. You need to come to the res and see what needs to be said in front of our family.
And there he is at the reservation, Jeffrey Bolton, and I give him credit for going out.
Receives the apology letter from the Mayo Clinic. William Mayo's action. Mayo snatched the warrior's body and allowed his children to play with the skeleton.
Okay, in Mankato, 1862 to 1987, here's a park that you can go to. I've been there. It was a year of reconciliation where they apologized officially and they wanted to move on with their lives. Okay, like we all need to.
1862,
Men held each other's hands.
Okay, last story for today. Little Crow. Taoyateduta, his Native American name, he was known as Chief Little Crow. He was a leader of the Sioux Uprising. His people are red. He had 6 wives and 22 children, and I can't go into that. I'll explain that to you after you're married, 8th graders. I can't go into it right now. Okay? Wow. Okay. Number 14, and I know we haven't had it, doesn't matter. To ensure that Native Americans were out of Minnesota, a bounty awarding money for every Native American killed was awarded to the people that shot Native Americans. Do you think this is yes or no? Okay? 1862. And there's no retakes. Okay? And you'll be ineligible for kickball and things like that if you get it wrong. There's the check. $500. I love primary sources. There's the check right there. It was paid to Nathan Lomson, $500. He shot Little Crow and he got paid $500 to do it because it was illegal to be a Native American in Minnesota in 1863 and also in Iowa for that matter. Okay? 6 months after the mass execution, a farmer shot Little Crow. Little Crow's body was dragged to the town square of Hutchinson, Minnesota, and I'm not going to read the rest of it. Again, there's the check. We have the primary source. Nathan Lomser was out deer hunting with his son Chauncey. He didn't know the Elder Dakota he saw near his land, but he knew he was a Native American. So he shot him, and he got paid $500 to do it. Okay? I am not a coward. I will die with you. Little Crow knew how powerful the United States was in 1862. He had been to Washington, D.C. He said, if you kill one white man, 10 times 10 times 10 will come and kill you. I'm not a coward. I will fight. And he did. But he was not killed in the war. He was killed the next summer at Hutchinson, Minnesota. And there's his grave. Okay? Here's a little better picture with some arrows on it. Anything interesting about it? Do we?
Died and buried.
Okay. Yeah. What do you predict? Okay, very good. Where do you think his bones were for 108 years? He died July 3rd, 1863. That's when he was shot. Where were his bones for 108 years? In the Historical Society of Minnesota. They finally released the bones in 1971, and then he got a proper burial. Little Crow did. Okay? There it is again. There's his tombstone. Okay? I've lost a few ounces since this picture. I do want you to know that. I've lost a few ounces. Okay? This is on Native American land. It's very precious.
Where is this?
I'm not going to tell you that. There is the great-great-grandson of Little Crow, and I got to meet him. I got to go there. It's his Native American land, and I took 8th graders there. And they got to meet him also. And we got to tell that story. So it is in South Dakota, I will tell you that. But it's Native American land. You have to have permission to go there like you should, and we got that.
On a reservation.
Yeah, on a reservation. Yeah. Okay? Thank you for letting me tell my story, and thanks for coming out today. When you love history, nothing hurts. Okay? And it's a privilege to, all of you could get up and talk today. You all love history. You all have things you could talk about. Gail just picked me out. Okay? And thank you very much.
Are there any questions for Kent before we let you go?
I've got a question.
Yeah.
Actually, it's about the same thing, but I read a book a couple of years ago. It's the University of Minnesota Press, and it's called Minnesota Land of the Dakota.
Yeah.
And before I got through that book, I cried several times. And the one thing they did with Dakota Indians, after the hanging at Mankato, they moved the rest to Fort Snelling, but they did not have them in the fort. They put them in the swamp over the winter.
Women and children were moved to Fort Snelling, right where the Mississippi and Minnesota come together.
They lived in the swampland, and they lost a lot more through that.
Yes, and if they lived, they were put on a boat and went all the way down to Davenport, and eventually they were moved to a nice reservation in Kansas where most of them died. But that happened at New Ulm, and it also happened at Mankato.
And the other thing that happened was so much of this was political leaders who now have cities and counties named after them, and they were all Democrats.
Yeah. Alexander Ramsey, Henry Sibley.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, good job of reading. Okay. My wife is an artist. She's a calligrapher, but she knows so much about history because of reading. She's a very good reader, and so it's fun to have her take on different things. So, yes.
I listening to you speak, I'd like to ask you a little bit about your philosophy of teaching these hard topics to 8th graders, and how you teach these difficult topics in today's world, realizing that these things happened, that we need to address them in some way, and what the reaction of your students are to the way that you teach this.
That's a good question. Think about packets. Think about worksheets. We used to subdue kids with those. Stay in your seat and do the chapter. We don't do that anymore. Kids don't deserve that anymore. We have to teach real history. We have to, kids are curious. Everybody's curious. My job is to tap into that. I have to tell stories, but I have to do the homework to get them to do that. And then my kids are out of their seat at least one day a week where they don't have desks or chairs, and they're looking at history like the treaty. They're answering questions about it. And then the other thing I like to give kids is instant feedback, okay? I don't want to see them in the mall 20 years from now and give them their test back. They want the answer right now. And it helps every kid. They want to know, did I get this right? If they didn't get it right, they go right back to the primary source and look at it again and come and tell me the answer again. So I use primary sources, and I've taught for 39 years, so people trust me. I would say if I was newly starting out teacher, it would be a lot harder, and I know that. So I guess it's just, I'm just myself, to answer your question. Okay?
Speaking about a topic like this to students today, how are you addressing the horrible things that have happened that reflect into today?
Well, we talk a lot about how history affects today, a lot about it. You know, people are stuck in traffic jams right now in Atlanta because of S-curves and hairpin curves, and they're thinking this planner did this on accident. They made bad, no, they did it to isolate neighborhoods. They did it to kill off neighborhoods, so it was done on purpose. So we talk a lot about that. And as a teacher in Iowa, you can still talk about the past. You just can't label things differently today and people inherently racist today. You cannot do that. But this is Civil War and before, you know, that's what I'm talking a lot about. So I use primary sources and I show them what happened. And you can't argue with that. Anything else? And you know, hard history needs taught. Okay? It does. So, all right, thank you very much.
Thank you. I think he's made some really good points. If you like history, if you have kids or grandkids that like history, they might be involved in National History Day, which is the state competition. The state finals are next week. And the decision recently came down from the federal government to cancel National History Day celebration in May in Washington, D.C. This is one of the cost-cutting measures, and it will save about $132,000 this year. These kids have been working really hard all year, doing research on their own on the topic. So I made my calls and emails over the weekend when I found out. So let's let kids keep learning about history because it is really important. So I'm off my soapbox now. Our next Iowa Files will be on Sunday, May 18th, and it's about women's correction in Iowa, a history. So author Erica Spiller will be talking about the fact, do you know Iowa built a prison before we were even a state? That's how many troublemakers we had. And I think this is telling, early in Iowa's correctional history, women disproportionately served time for crimes considered to be against public decency, such as prostitution, lewdness, and incorrigibility. I like incorrigibility. So you also have a questionnaire on your seat if you'd like to take a moment. Let us know what you thought of today's program, of the rest of the Iowa Files. Is there something you want to hear about, something you want to know? Let me know because I will start planning for the next year's session about June. So thank you all for coming today. Have a good day.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.